Now, let's move on to the EU summit that we were mentioning in our headlines earlier. The European Council is meeting in Brussels today at a summit to discuss key decisions regarding Ukraine, providing more funding and starting formal talks on joining of the bloc. The move comes as the European Union leaders agree to release more than 10 billion euros worth of funding to Hungary, which had previously been frozen over concerns about the rule of law in the country. Prime Minister Viktor Orban had been threatening to block the EU's plans to help Ukraine. Well, to get more on this, I'm joined now by the BBC's Europe reporter, Sofia Butitsa, who is in Brussels. Sofia, bring us up to date on what's happening in this meeting then.
Morning, Regini. Well, we are expecting a bit of diplomatic drama here in Brussels today. Just to give you a bit of context, the man who's chairing this meeting has said that this is a pivotal European summit and has urged all 27 European leaders to make bold decisions on Ukraine. Now, one of those decisions, as you just mentioned, is approving the next aid package to Kyiv, which will be worth 50 billion euros. Now, Kyiv is desperate to get this money. We heard from the Ukrainian First Lady a couple of days ago. She said that if Western countries were to stop sending financial aid to Ukraine, that would leave Ukrainians in mortal danger. But there is one big obstacle here, and that is that the Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, is very much against sending additional money to Kyiv. Now, he's not alone. There is definitely a sense of Ukraine fatigue among some European countries like Slovakia, but it is Hungary that today is seen as the biggest hurdle to try and reach a solution. So we expect this to be quite a long and complicated negotiation. We just heard from the Finnish Prime Minister who's arrived in Brussels, he said, with a lot of extra shirts, just in case this summit goes into the weekend.
And is it likely to go on longer? I mean, is something going to be resolved at the end of this summit, or is there going to be an unresolved issue that goes on further, Sofia?
So that's the question that a lot of people are asking. Now, the hope is that Viktor Orban will change his mind and will sort of come to an agreement when it comes to money for Ukraine. But what is expected to be a difficult negotiation point is the other big decision on Ukraine that will be discussed today, and that is whether Ukraine is ready to officially start talks on joining the European Union. Now, this is something that Ukraine really wants. President Zelensky has said that a positive decision today will send a lot of hope to his army and his people. But again, Viktor Orban here said that this is a red line for him, and that if Ukraine were to join the bloc now, that would have devastating consequences for the EU. And you know, Rajini, what he says really matters here, because a decision on any new country joining the EU needs to be unanimous. And this means that Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of a small country, has a lot of power here. He could veto the whole thing. So, you know, we expect these negotiations to be extremely complicated. And you've got the EU here that is very keen to send a strong message of support, a message of solidarity to Ukraine. We heard from the Ukrainian Foreign Minister, who's here in Brussels, and he's basically called this the mother of all decisions. And he said that if the EU fails today to reach an agreement on Ukraine joining the EU, that would mean that the European Union is unable to keep its promises to Ukraine.
Sofia Butitsa in Brussels with the latest on that summit. Thank you very much, as always, for bringing us up to date. Well, as Sofia was mentioning there, the discussions over aid, we are continuing to bring you coverage of Russia's President Vladimir Putin, who is delivering a news conference. You can see him there. And we've just heard him say in that news conference that he says it looks like foreign aid is running out for Ukraine. So he's clearly watching closely events in Brussels and in the last few days, the fight for aid in the US Congress as well. Well, let's have a quick listen in to what President Putin has to say.
Job. Now we have 14 heroes of Russia out of those people recruited back then, and a lot of other decorations also were awarded to them. So now around 244,000 people, servicemen, are in the operation area. Regiments have been formed to service the military equipment, because there are a lot of very good professionals. Around 41,000 people have been dismissed because of reached the age limit or have some health problems, and after that we started a broad campaign to attract volunteers to sign contracts with the armed forces, and we planned to recruit 400.
So President Putin, as that conference continues, and we've also heard other things from him this morning, he says it's either we agree on peace in Ukraine or we will solve the problem by using force. He also said this morning we are not changing our goals in Ukraine. So obviously we're going to be hearing from President Putin throughout the morning. This news conference lasts a number of hours. I'm joined by my colleague Vitaly Shevchenko, who's also been monitoring that news conference. So what else has he been saying this morning?
Well, so far it's followed a familiar pattern. Vladimir Putin started by talking at some length about the Russian economy. He said it was doing well despite Western sanctions. He spoke about how salaries were rising, how life expectancy was rising as well, unemployment is falling, and he seemed proud of it. And then the moderator said that a torrent, that's a quote, a torrent of questions about the so-called special military operation against Ukraine have been received. And Vladimir Putin, he is sticking to his guns. He said Russia is still determined to, quote, denazify and demilitarize Ukraine. So no change of sentiment there.
OK, well, Vitaly, we will stay with you and that news conference throughout the morning. So do stay with us. And of course, if you're watching, President Putin is delivering his annual news conference. He didn't do it last year, so it's the first one since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We will make sure we stay with that throughout the morning. Mr. Putin saying there's no need for additional military mobilization today. More on that story after a quick break.